Benvenuti a tutte e tutti. Good morning, everybody. So my name is Claudia Soria. I'm a researcher at the Institute for Computational Linguistics of the National Research Council in Pisa, in Italy. And I'm one of the members of the CIRCE project. And today I was invited by Professor Silvia Calamai to introduce our guest speaker and also to celebrate the first episode of the CIRCE seminars. There's a series of lessons given by distinguished researchers and experts in the field of language discrimination, language and accent discrimination. So let's introduce our speaker for today and welcome her. So a big welcome to Dr. Khedidja Hammoudi, who's a doctor and lecturer in language sciences at the University of Tlemcen in Algeria. She's got her MA in 2018 in Jordan and her PhD in 2021 in social linguistics and Arabic dialectology, about which she wrote several articles. She also occupies the position of the head of the section of English at the University of Tlemcen. She's now a visiting fellow at Siena University, where she'll hold a series of lectures and seminars related to her field of research. So let's welcome Dr. Hammoudi. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much indeed for your, okay, I should appear on the screen. Okay, so thank you very much indeed for your presentation and your kind words. Before I start, I would like to thank the University of Siena for welcoming me, and certainly the CIRCE project headed by the coordinator, Professor Silvia Calamai, and the whole group of the CIRCE Erasmus project. I'm so pleased and delighted to be or to take part in the different activities, scientific or pedagogical. I also thank all the colleagues who have made a move from their respective universities up to here. So nice to see you, and thank you so much for all your efforts. I also welcome the students whom I have already met, I think, in previous occasions. Nice to see you again. And for those who haven't the pleasure to see me or to meet before, I think we are going to have a lot to do together in the coming sessions. So welcome to this seminar, and I hope we are going to exchange knowledge. It's certainly sharing of information, and nothing is, let's say, static. It's always open and subject to debate and reflection. So the topic today is on glottophobia in education and what will the majority of us or of our students face in educational settings. But before I start to dig into the concept of glottophobia and everything that is related to discrimination and the feelings that are related to that, I think that it is much more important to start with something that is related to languages and linguistic differences, because any other effect is a result, and before there is a result, there must be a cause, and this cause is related to a certain context, and this context, there must be something within this context. So would you please just move? Okay, to the next one. This is just the outline on what we are going to see in the coming things. So before I start, I would like just to share an anecdote that has happened to me once I came to Italy. Like, I have been invited for coffee, and I said that I do not drink coffee. But I said that I drink coffee with milk. So they said, "Oh yes, do you want some cappuccino?" I said, "No, no, I want coffee with milk." So they said, "Yes, it's cappuccino." For me, like, coffee with milk is something, and cappuccino must be something else, because we see that cappuccino has a foam and lots of bubbles, and the coffee with milk that I have in my home country is just like something very simple and a mixture of the two. So you see that language can affect, or culture can affect, the choice of words and the language that we use. And because cultures are different socially, certainly the choice of words is also going to be distinct. I suppose that in this room, there are people from different linguistic backgrounds. So I suppose that there are Italian speakers, right? And any other language in here? Chinese, okay, that's nice. And Arabic as well. I'm speaker of French, Arabic, and a mixture of a lot of things. It's a whole story in the Algerian linguistic or sociolinguistic situation. Never mind it. Here we have 3 different pictures, and we are going to comment on the 3 pictures and how we can see the same thing, but we're linguistically utter them differently. So if you want to ask about the time in Italian, what are you going to say? Time. So if I ask you if you want to ask what time is it, what are you going to say in Italian? Yes? All right, nice. So the direct synonym of time is what? Oh, nice. So if we, and in Chinese, is it something like that, or it's something that is completely different? Yes. Okay. Very nice. Good. So once we refer to the time, the problem in, not the problem, it's the reality in Algeria, that once we refer to the time, we do not refer to it as the horario, for example, in here, or like that's the time itself, but we refer to it as the clock or to the watch. And the watch is a hand watch, or the clock is what we have in the wall. So here we have different things, but it refers to the same exact thing, but it is labeled differently. And this is why that culture affects the way in which we label things or we utter them linguistically. For the second thing, or for the second picture, here we have a man who seems, according to you, how? Confused. Very nice. So if someone is confused or not very much knowledgeable, or sometimes, let's say they look quite silly, or how do you label this in Italian? That, for example, the word is silly or stupid, or what is it in Italian? You don't have a word for that? No? Okay, nice. In Algeria, if you want to refer to someone who is, let's say, silly or stupid, we do not have an exact term for it, but rather we're going to state that he is a donkey. So this donkey, it does not refer to the, let's say, to the animal, but it refers to the cognition of the animal, referring to the fact that this person has a slow cognition. So you see that languages are different and are constructed according to the culture in which someone is within the concept. Now, the third image, what do you think is there? What do you see in that image? Good. Yes, that blue shades. Now, if I ask you to label each shade of blue, what are you going, do you have precise names for shades of blue? More or less. There are some people who are going to say, or to classify them into the 2 last ones as, let's say, dark blue, and the 2 first ones as light blue. And others are going to label them as blue, this kind of blue, and another one. For example, in Algeria, we don't have precise labels, but rather we're going to switch to French in order to label those words or those colors, and you're going to say that we have the bleu Marseille, bleu ciel, bleu marine, for example, bleu marin, and so on and so forth. So it is going to be kind of switching in order to refer to the concept itself or to the color. So in here, the idea behind all of that is that we are different in terms of the languages that we possess. That is, in order to portray or to talk or to project one idea, sometimes we are talking about the same concept, the same thing, the same object, but we are using different words, and those words are embedded within the culture. And this is why we are culturally distinct and therefore linguistically distinct. Now, the thing is that this linguistic difference is not only at the level of language. That is, once we talk about language, is not necessarily the standard form like standard English, standard Italian, standard French, standard Arabic, and so on, but rather language, or in sociolinguistics, once we talk about language, it refers to any linguistic variety. That is the way in which we produce this language in order to communicate or transmit a certain message. So here, for linguistic distinction or linguistic variation, it can be at the level of the standard language, at informal languages, or what we call regional dialects, as it can be variation in terms of accents. Now, we hear a lot of people saying that you have a British-like accent, an American accent, and you sound like this and you sound like that. And we sometimes do not know the meaning or the meaning of what makes an accent or what is an accent in reality. So the first thing that we need to know about accent is that it is a linguistic variety. That is, once we talk about variation, it's something that changes, it's something that varies, it's something that is different from one place to another, from one person to another, from one group to another. So this is number one. Number two, accents are different from dialects, whereas dialects refer to the fact that there is a kind of diversity in vocabulary, in syntactic structures, and in pronunciation as well. That is, all linguistic levels are distinct from one place to another. Accents are only distinct in terms of pronunciation. That is the way in which we pronounce words. That is how we sound or how we utter those words. Is that fine so far? Good. So we're going to see the definition of accent in different ways and in different manners. The first one is phonetically speaking. Now, once we talk about phonetics, it is related to the articulation of sounds. That is the way in which we're supposed to transmit messages by making this kind of, let's say, pitch of the voice, the rhythm, and so on and so forth. So accents refers to the pronouncing a language by emphasizing a sound, stressing a syllable, and having a specific values or sound value in certain phonetic components, that is the components of some words. Let's say if the word time, for example, or if we have an accent or we want to produce the word time with a certain accent, we're going to say or to find that time has a certain kind of aspiration at the beginning, and this aspiration is a sound value, like it is adding something that is particular to the pronunciation of a particular word. All right? So once we are speaking or producing, there are some kind of results that appear in our voices or in the way in which we produce those languages, that we have the tone, the rhythm, and the pitch of the voice, these are technical terms that are known in phonetics. But what matters here is that once we are speaking a particular language, there is a kind of musicality. That if for example, the first time that I came to Italy and I met some people, I found that the musicality of Italian is distinct from the musicality and the rhythm that is found in Algerian. That, for example, if I am studying Italian, I'm going just to say buongiorno, but if it is stated or pronounced by an Italian, it's going to be buongiorno. It's something like has a certain kind of music. So the musicality that we have or that we find in different words and languages is what is what are accents about. It refers to the rhythm, pitches of the voice, the tone, and also intonation, aspiration, and all the phonetic aspects of pronouncing or producing a particular sound. Now, in some cases, we have biological effects, if not physical effects of accents. Now, I believe that everyone among us in this room has been raised by some caregivers, parents or grandparents, or within a family. Now, as children, we have this ability to perform languages, or what we call language acquisition. That is, we are going to acquire the language, which is the mother tongue or the first language or the home language or the language that is spoken by caregivers. We're going to acquire it innately, naturally, unconsciously, and effortlessly. In the sense that once we are children, we're not going to be in a teaching, learning situation, and parents are not going to make you sit on the table and say that you have to pronounce this as such and you have to do this as such, but you're going just to be socially inserted within the community, within this family environment, and then you end up by having a certain language traits that are taken from the environment where you have been born. Right? Do you agree? Good. Now, within the process of acquisition, our body is growing as well. That is, we're not going to remain children, but rather we are going to reach certain ages. So once growing or growing up, we are going to also be growing not only physically, but also linguistically. And within this linguistic growth, we're going to develop a kind of familiarity in, or our speech muscles, the speech organs, are going to be developed or be trained in a certain way rather than other ways. That is, if we take a child born in China and another one born in Italy, we're going to find that there are speech muscles that include in the lips, the tongue, the jaws, the vocal cords, and so on and so forth, are going to be trained in a specific way to produce specific sounds. This is why that some sounds that are present in Chinese, for example, are not present in other languages, and it is the same case for probably Italian, Arabic, and other languages around the world. You see? So while producing those sounds, there is a kind of familiarity is built that, for example, in the tongue is going to be accustomed or acquainted to producing sound in a specific way, in a specific manner, in which we have been raised this way. We have been accustomed, we have been naturally and effortlessly trained to behave that way linguistically. So, for example, your tongue is going to be just naturally and without paying attention, you're going to be speaking Italian, and there wouldn't be any effort as opposed to any foreign language or second language or language that you are learning. You see that you're going to be paying attention to your production or pronunciation, the way in which you're going to move your tongue. It is the tip of the tongue and the back of the tongue towards the alveolar ridge or to the velum, and different speech organs that you have to pay attention to where you're going to move your vocal cords or organs and how you're going to move your muscles. So learning or dealing with or speaking a foreign language is certainly going to be having or is going to have a certain effect on the musicality of the language that we are speaking. Why? Because our speech muscles have been acquainted and accustomed to a certain way of speaking. So if something new or something strange comes to the tongue or to the speech organs, it is certainly and naturally going to be with a certain difficulty or certain musicality. Why? Because we have been taught like that or trained this way. So it is something that is natural to have a kind of the mother tongue effect on our new language or the learned language or the foreign language. It's something that is completely fine to have between brackets an accent or an accented speech. Why? And now we return back to the combination of two things. We have accent and the speech muscles that have been trained in L1, and then the accent of L1 is also going to affect or consequently going to affect the production of the foreign language or the new language. And this is something that is so natural, scientifically and biologically or physically speaking. Now, once we refer to this item, socially speaking, we're not going to find that accents are labeled this way or even understood that way. Why? Because if someone is speaking in a particular way or sound in a specific way, they're going to be considered as coming from this social group or from that social group, or from this regional area or that regional area, belonging to this class or that other class. So in here, there is a kind of division in terms of social connotations that are attributed to accents. That accents, once we refer to them in terms of society or social views, they're not going to be seen as the production of speech or how speech sounds are produced by the tongue, and that the tongue has not been acquainted with this and that, which is something that is natural and scientific, but rather it is going to be something that is subjective and something that is based on social attitudes or social attributes or social thoughts, which end up by social divisions. This is why socially, this natural speech, that is the natural speech producing a foreign language in a certain difficulty or certain, let's say, linguistic effects or sound effects or accent effects, that is L1 accent effect, excuse me, that once we refer to L1, it is the mother tongue or it is the first language that we are born with or we learn or we acquire innately as children, okay? Nice. So this natural speech production can be transmitted to a complicated situation once judged, and the fear of being judged starts. If someone starts speaking a foreign language, but with a certain background of an accent that is in the background, a certain kind of musicality that is related to the first language or to the mother tongue, scientifically speaking, we have seen that it is something that is natural and that's fine, and that is something that is completely okay to do that. But once it comes to society, people are going to have attitudes. They are going to have some kind of divisions that this is good speech and this is bad speech. This is something that is pronounced in a good way. It is not pronounced that in that way. So this prejudices of accents and bias towards accents, or what makes one good and one bad, is going to result to a lot of, let's say, harmful effects, which we are going to see throughout the presentation. So we move on. Okay. I was saying that in society, or socially speaking, we have this kind of tendency to divide people. people can be divided in terms of age, gender, educational background, their class, their residence, and we have seen this in previous sessions. And also, they tend to divide people according to race. Now, before dealing with this critical race theory, let's talk about race itself, that sometimes we tend to divide people according to their race. Now, according to you, what do you think race is, or it refers to what as a social variable? That is, we need to know what race is so that to understand what racism is. Because we generally understand racism and we keep using or blaming people for being race or pointing them that you are racist and this is a racist act. But once it comes to, and we have to make a certain step back in order to understand what race is. So any attempt here? Excellent. Yes, it is related to ethnicity. That is, to which group does someone belong? What is your origin? To which ethnic group you belong? So in here, we can find a lot of races, a lot of ethnicities, a lot of identity stuff related to the term of race. But something that is also important in race is the term of power. Now, you know the meaning of power, right? You know? What is power? Power. Okay. If there is someone that is powerful, that is holding this force and strength, there must be someone who is, yes, lower or less powerful. So in here, if we want to make the combination or relationship between power and race, or the reverse, we're going to find that some people hold this power. They are socially more powerful than others, and therefore they recognize themselves as better than others. The same thing applies on race. That is, if someone belongs to this race, that is coming from this ethnic group, he or she is going to be considered as belonging to a higher, let's say, class, or having this kind of positive status. Whereas if someone else belongs to a different ethnic group or coming from a different race, he or she is going to be considered as lower. Now we are using the term high and low, and later on we are going to label them in correct and precise ways. In addition to that, there is another parameter or another point in the equation, which is language. Now, language can also be powerful, or sometimes when we are reading, we are going to find the power of language versus the language of power. And in here, we're interested in both things. That language is okay, it is powerful and it can guide people to here and there, but also there is this power that we divide people, or upon which we divide people, in the sense that if someone is speaking this variety or this accent, he or she is going to be highly valued, and if they do not, they are going to be seen as opposed to highly valued. They're going to be seen? Yes, thank you. They are going to be either stigmatized or negatively seen. The combination of the three concepts is what is known as the critical race theory. Now, the critical race theory, if you try to make some, let's say, readings about that, you're going to find that it deals with examining the intersection of race, power, and language. And sometimes you're going to find also law and the money, which are very important. Now, we omitted those two concepts from this equation because we are only interested in language. And the sake or the result for that is to know the inequalities that exist in society. Here we have a picture in front of us that summarizes the critical race theory. Suppose that all of us are called for a job interview. We're all getting prepared, getting our certificate of the language and having our CV prepared, and everything is okay. And we are waiting for our turn, just like the people are, or the picture is stipulating. We're sitting for this job interview and we are waiting for our turn to come. Once we're going to be holding the interview, a lot of us are going to be speakers of English or speakers of the language that is required or asked in that interview. But there is one thing or many things that are going to distinguish those interviewers or interviewees, sorry. One is the competencies that we have, that certainly we're coming to this interview, to this job offer with different competencies. Like you are, let's say, punctual and you are, let's say, highly motivated and you have work experience, you have this and you have that and you have that, and you have the language and you have many other things. So we are different in terms of competencies, and then we are different in terms of how we are producing the language. Now, once we are within this interview, we're going to be selected. Unfortunately, not happen in some cases, of course, following the critical race theory. We're not going to be chosen according to the competencies that we have, but rather according to the language that we utter. Now, the critical race theory has been, or in the image that we have someone or a group of animals, including a dog, a fish, an elephant, a penguin, and a monkey. And they are all asked to reach the top of the tree. Now, what do you think about that, critically speaking, or even objectively speaking? We have a lot of animals, each distinct in their own way, but still they're asked to fulfill the same thing, which is reaching the top of the tree. Yes? Excellent, good. Yeah, so it is going to be fine for some to do this, for example. Yes, good, excellent, yes. So for a monkey, it's going to be easier to do that. Whereas for an elephant, it's not going to be the same. However, if we check the competencies of each animal separately, we're going to find that there are some of them which are good in running, others in swimming, others in climbing, and lot of activities can be done by those animals. But in here, what was asked, it was like directed. And this is what we call a structural or systematic racism, that we have to go in it is something that is dictated on us, that we have to follow some way of doing the thing in order to be accepted. So if you do that thing in that way, you're accepted. If you don't do it, you are not. Yes, thank you. So similarly, we're going to find something, let's say, analogous in education or in the classroom. I bet that once we are in a certain classroom, I think from childhood, early childhood up to the now university classrooms, we tend to use some kind of vernacular, and sometimes we are, especially in language classes, we are going to be, let's say, instructed in a certain way that you have to speak that way and not that way. And sometimes, in some conditions or in some circumstances or some contexts, there are some kind of divisions between students. Students who, or learners of languages, who tend to speak the language in a, let's say, fluent way or native-like way, or at least an advanced manner. And all the learners who are average and they have some kind of troubles, probably some mistakes, probably some kind of background in their way of speaking. So by applying the critical race theory on educational setting, we're going to find that the three components are there within the educational setting. That is not only the fact that we are dividing people according to their social background, that is from where they are coming, or what's their ethnic group, or what's their probably identity traits, but rather on the language they are speaking, and more precisely on the accents they are producing or uttering. Is that fine so far? Good. We move on. Right. Now, starting or after knowing what race is, as we talk about racism a lot. Now, I might ask you, what is your definition of racism? We hear a lot saying that this group is racist and that group is not. This one is powerful, the other one is not. So we have introduced what race is, and now we need to know what racism is. Yes? Good. Discrimination, bias, good. Then based on what? Good. Yes, it is based on one social variable or one social factor that we are going to judge someone or stereotype someone or negatively see someone. Now, if I say that someone stereotypes someone, it starts from a mental idea. It starts from an attitude. Now, if you try to look for research or to look for articles or papers written on attitudes and what an attitude is, you're going to find, or what is something that is common between the different scholars and researchers dealing with attitudes, is that it is related to possessing or developing a mental position or state with regard to a particular fact. That is, if I say that I like this idea versus I dislike this idea, it's certainly based on certain items, but what is more, let's say, important and prominent is that this attitude is mental. It is psychologically processed, that in the sense that the idea or this attitude, it is necessary to point that attitudes can either be positive as they can be negative. That is, if I have a certain positive point or positive feeling about something, it is going to be a positive attitude. If I have a different viewpoint, that it is going to be a negative attitude. Now, in racism, we're certainly interested in the opposite direction, not in positive attitudes. So you can, or anyone among us can either possess or develop. Now, there is a distinction between the two. Like once you possess something and you develop it, if you possess it, this means that you have this state, you already have it. But if you develop it, this means that it is going to be, yes? Good. It is going to be acquired or learned or developed through time. That is, we need a lot of, or kind of a certain period of time and a lot of conditioning in order to arrive to this state of mind, that it is something that is psychological. If you go to or you see someone and you start, let's say, stereotyping them or having something, let's say, a kind of evaluation, a kind of assessment to their probably appearance, the color of their skin, the shape of their body, and what they have, what they possess, this means that you are holding a kind of mental state or mental positioning towards or against a certain fact or an idea or a person or a situation or an event or whatever thing. Okay? So those attitudes, as if we are developing this or this mental state, is going to bring or foster this ability or a sense of power, as if the one who is stigmatizing someone or evaluating someone, they give themselves the right or the power in order to evaluate this other person, and as if they have this lens to distinguish between what is good and bad, what is high and low, and what is probably superior and inferior, and this is resulting in kind of social divisions. Lots of divisions occur in society just because we have this mental stressing or mental positioning or this state of mind that stipulates that this person or this idea or this exact event or act is fine and another event or another action or is wrong. So this is something that is personal and it is more or less subjective, that is whole to the thinking and the processing of every or each individual. Now, this kind of division, dividing people into high and low, superior, inferior, good and bad, this is what makes good speech, this is what division in itself is a term that holds negativity in it. And in addition to that, or once we try to project the concept of division into languages and how languages are divided or our attitudes towards languages, certainly we are going to be appreciating one way of producing rather than another way. But appreciation is fine. But once we start having this kind of mistreatment, judgment, bias, stereotyping, negativity, and prejudice, discrimination, knowing that probably this person, if they are speaking this way, and they are low, they are negative, they are stereotyped, they do not belong to this class, they do not do this, they are, and all the negative things are going to be projected on that person. So it's the same thing that we can see, and later on we are going to see glottophobia in education, or how linguistic racism is. It is the fact of developing this kind of attitude, like having this strong negative feeling or state of mind against something, that it is completely, I return back to the same idea, it is completely fine to have opinions, that you are free and we are all free to have certain kind of opinions. But once we start having this negative opinion and this pressure and thinking that we have the power to disevaluate or minimize or mistreat another person just because of the way they are speaking, here is the wrong thing. Why? Because we are born different, we are naturally different, and therefore we are naturally speaking differently. And our productions are certainly going to be different. And certainly there is the standard form. And also we have to bear in mind that there are other regional forms, that someone being raised in a certain family is going to be speaking in a manner, and someone raised in a different family is going to be speaking in that manner. But it's not us, or it's not for us to blame why this one is speaking that way and why the other one is speaking that way. We have to accept things as they are. But if we are, as if we have a balance, so if the balance is going to be to the negative side, to the wrong side, to have even hatred, and we are going to see that we can even, or people, that I'm using we referring to people, not we necessarily the people in the room, okay? So people can even arrive to a kind of hatred or disrespect, or not only pointing out that the person, they can even avoid them. If you're speaking this, a kind of language or accent. So I'm going just to flee or escape the situation. And this is something that is really very seriously wrong. Now, if this exact same pressure of feelings, of negative thoughts, of negativity itself is projected within an educational setting. Like in here, we're not only dividing people according to what society divides them as, but according to what we have mentally developed as an attitude, or what we have constructed as an attitude. And this is why in some educational settings, we're going to find that there are some students or learners of languages who do not speak at all. They sit at the back and they keep silent because just of the fear of being judged, the fear of, let's say, if I speak, I'm going to commit a mistake, but probably they are going to say something wrong about me. My accent is not enough. I'm not enough. What if I commit an error? Is this good? Is what I'm going to say good? So they are going to be embedded in their speech. Why? Because of this glottophobia. So the concept of glottophobia is referred to as, you're going to find it in the literature or once you make some readings, as linguistic discrimination or linguicism or accentism or language discrimination. Lots of terms are used interchangeably. Now, in education, or in its distinction, or in its definition, sorry, it is used to describe this illegitimate linguistic discrimination. Now, the term illegitimate, now we carry on with the definition put by the scholar mentioned there. It is disrespect. Look at the terms that are used. That is, all the terms that we have been using in order to describe this kind of racism or belittling a certain way of speaking or an accent or a language or a variety in itself. Look at the negativity and the pressure it holds. Discrimination, or it can be defined as contempt, disrespect, hatred, aggregation, rejection, exclusion of person. So you see that it holds a lot. It's not only about having a certain opinion about someone speaking in a different way. It can even move to other further steps. It's like when someone sees another one and they are going just to directly escape from them. So this escaping is going to be at the level of languages or the accents that are produced. So if someone, let's say according to glottophobia or the definition of the accentism, it is, or it holds concepts of disrespect, hatred, aggregation, and rejection. And I insist on this, this term. That's it's not necessarily that sometimes we have students or language learners who isolate themselves from the class because they have been rejected once, either by the teacher or they have been bullied because of their mates or their friends, or because just they have committed a mistake in, or they have mispronounced a word rather than another word. I can give you an example that for the word time, for standard English it is time, but sometimes in some dialects, the tu is not pronounced as tu, but rather it has kind of other, let's say, suprasegmental features, phonetically speaking, and it is going to be realized as t. So it is going to be time. And for an example of an Indian, for example, they are going to be saying time, and it is a combination of tu and du. And if someone is speaking as such, it is completely, we have to understand that we do not have to stigmatize them or to reject them, to isolate them from the classroom or from the class or from, let's say, from the friendship environment, but rather we have just to embrace or to hold their let's say, the suprasegmental features that they have in their way of speaking, and then make their pronunciation and their production of speech better through, let's say, training, and via time, it is going to be developed into a better version. Now, in addition to this, we have based on fact of considering some linguistic forms used by these persons as incorrect, inferior, or bad. Here, I can also share with you an example of a student of mine whom I had in like 5 years probably ago. And she used to be so silent in the class. Like whenever I enter the class, I see some kind of behavior. And she used to be just silent, not preferring to speak. And the lecture that was there, the module, was that of oral expression. It was called oral expression because we teach skills. And among the skills, we have the written, the reading, or the writing, reading, and we have the speaking skill. Now, in speaking, of course, we are supposed to integrate all the students with us. They have to speak, they have to talk, and there are a lot of conditions and a lot of, let's say, a lot of scenarios to be held during that session. Now, one of the sessions, this student has come to me with her face turning pale, with her hands shaking and voice trembling, like she was so scared to approach me as a teacher and saying that, "Miss, can I talk to you?" I said, "Yes, okay, go ahead. What's wrong? Is there anything I can help you with?" She said that, "I love your session, but I cannot speak." I said that, "Why? That is, I'm here to help you speak, that we are in an environment that is quite good and friendly, and we are here to share our, let's say, experiences. We are here to share knowledge, and it is completely fine that you speak whatever you want, depending on, of course, the conversation in which we are or the topic of the session." And she said that, "I'm just afraid that my mates bully me or they laugh at me." I said that, and she said that once I spoke in a class and I made a mistake. And this mistake was related to pronunciation. Instead of pronouncing this word this way, I pronounced it in that way. And all the people, that is the teacher, has mocked her. And then she found herself in a very embarrassing situation. Like she said, "Okay, I decide to isolate myself. I decide not to speak in any other class." So this is one example among dozens or probably millions of other students or learners of languages around the world facing the same exact problem or issue, that they are mistreated and not, let's say, they are stereotyped for the way they speak and for the suprasegmental features they have in the background of their languages. Other examples can be taken from from my master's and PhD works. I have been all the time interested in knowing people's attitudes towards the way in which they speak, or how others speak and how they evaluate that. You know, in Algeria, it is divided into different provinces, and within each region, we have like a terrible number of linguistic diversity. Now, there are some kind of people or kind of pronunciation that is qualified or classified or categorized as urban, which is prestigious and positive and. On the opposite side, we have the rural or the Bedouin dialect, which is negatively seen. You know, and believe me, that in some of the contexts or the interviews that I have had, that some of my interviews, they have ended up by crying for the mistreatment they have had because of the accents they were speaking, this dialect rather than another one. So if we see that someone is distinct in one way, it's it's distinguishing people. It's like we are different linguistically speaking. I'm now emotional. Like, can you move on? Now, that once we see that people are different, it's just because they are different. They have been raised in a way, they have been taught in that way, they have been speaking that way from childhood. And we cannot blame someone for speaking this way or the other way. We cannot tell that if you are coming from this region and this means that you are superior and you are good and you are correct and you are producing correct speech. And if someone else is coming from a different region, they are going to be considered as incorrect or even, let's say, producing bad speech. Now, from the two examples that I have given, which are very few in comparison to what reality holds. That is, if we want to make research on people suffering from this racism or from this, let's say, linguistic racism or glottophobia, particularly in educational settings, we're going to find that a lot suffer. And they suffer inside, not outside. And the more they suffer, the more the effect is going to be big. And this suffering of accentism or linguistic discrimination is like a balloon. You know what a balloon is? When the balloon when there is no air within the balloon, if you tick it, it's not going to be exposed. But rather, if you're going to have some air within the balloon, certainly, if you are going to try to tick yes, you're going to hear what? Yes, an explosion. Yes, thank you. We're going to hear an explosion. And the more the air pressure is big in that balloon, the more the exposure or the exposure is going to be big. Yes. It's the same thing in linguistic discrimination. The more a certain person holds some, let's say, attitudes or receives negativity, receives pressure, receives the stereotyping and let's say biasing and misjudging and mistreatment, they're going to be like this balloon. Each time receiving a certain pressure, each time receiving a pressure, each time receiving pressure, until the effect is going to be so. We're going to see. Now, the different things, no, just keep it. This pressure that a certain who is bullied or laughed at or stereotyped or stigmatized linguistically or in terms of accent, they're going to or is known as cognitive distortions. Cognitive distortions, or more precisely negative cognitive distortions, are related to the state of mind that one person can develop about themselves. That is, I can have, as opposed to it, I can have self-esteem and this kind of confidence. That is, I like myself and I appreciate myself. I'm doing good. I'm achieving this. I'm achieving that. And this is something like positive mental idea or attitude about myself. As opposed to this, we have this mental or this cognitive distortion or negative cognitive distortion in the sense that we can think about ourselves, about our esteem, about our self-confidence in a wrong way, in a negative way, in a very ill way, in a very, let's say, the more we receive pressure, the more we're going to have those negative items in our heads, and therefore this is going to result to other mental conditions or mental results. Among them are mental filtering, catastrophizing, personalization, and overgeneralization. Now, we're going to see the definition of each concept separately. But what matters here is that a learner of any type in any classroom can be holding a kind of mental positioning towards something or against something, even themselves. That is, they can be just fine with what they are doing, but some people hold really some psychological or mental thinking about what the world is saying about them. And they are going to point the fact that if someone is looking at me, they are looking at me because of that and that and that, and this, they are going to be, let's say, self-centered. And then if they are going to be in a situation where they have to talk, they are going just to be isolated and they prefer not to talk. If they are within a context of friends and they're just prefer to keep silent, or they prefer to keep silent rather than to negotiate the idea, and so on and so forth. And I believe and I trust that many of you have seen some situations like that or have heard from a friend something like that. Please. So among those mental distortions, normally there are 15 mental distortions if you check on the literature, but I selected just those which are, let's say, prominent and can be included in the educational setting. The first thing is mind reading. Mind reading refers to the fact that a student or learner is going to read the mind of the person who is talking to them. That is either a teacher or a classmate. So they're going to read the mind of the other. And once they read it, they're not going to expect something positive, but rather they're going to fall in the trap of negativity. So if I say that the teacher is looking at me or talking to me, so they're talking or they are saying or they are thinking in a negative way. So the learner is going to read the mind of the other in a very negative way. That is, all what they expect is something negative. All what they expect is something that is not or does not hold a positive or positivity in its thinking. So the learner is going to assume that the one they are speaking to know what the other person, as if once the one who is under discrimination or the one who is, let's say, bullied or stigmatized or stereotyped is going to be thinking instead of the other. That is, if someone is now in front of me and they are talking to me, I'm going just to look at them and then stating, oh, they must consider me as stupid. And probably I appear very illiterate, or probably I feel retarded, and therefore they're seeing me negatively. And then lot of mental scenarios are going to be created. And for the creation of scenarios, we have got catastrophizing. The word catastrophizing is taken from the term, yes? Catastrophe, excellent, yes. And a catastrophe is, according to you, a disaster, excellent, yes. So it is something that is, or that can be related to a disaster, as if it is going to be something that is so big. So in here, the learner of a language, or someone who is, or who has been stereotyped or negatively seen, is going to create a kind of scenario in their heads that any other situation is also going to be stereotyped, or I'm going also to be stereotyped, I'm going to be negatively seen, I'm going to be prejudiced, I'm going to be biased, and some people are going to see, and they are going to create like a scenario which does not really exist. And this scenario is negative. Why? Because we have started from negativity, and the negative attitude, if you remember in the first stages of the lecture, that we have stated that attitudes can be so harmful. They can be so harmful. They start from a mental thought, from a mental thinking, from having a certain position about someone or against something or an idea or a fact, but they end up by harming the person or harming the people who are in front of us. Why? Because they hold this pressuring them this negativity, which can really hurt the other person. So can you see now the mental or the psychological problems that one attitude that is just stereotyping someone or laughing at them or bullying them or just stating that what they are saying is not good, is not correct, their speech is accented, or say, oh, you have this accent in your speech, that some people can accept it, but others can feel quite shy. But this shyness is going to turn to something that is psychologically so deep, and it can really harm the person who has been bullied. Next. Labeling, certainly. Now, if you're catastrophizing or creating disasters, and if this person who has been stereotyped is creating a disaster, certainly he or she is going to say all the negative about himself or herself. That is, if they are making the thing looks bigger, they're going to make their, let's say, their own personality looks in a, let's say, very negative or an inferior way. So starting from just one example or one instance or one remark, it can be just a remark, it can be just a joke, and what we call friends joke, or a simple joke that's saying that, oh, look how they are pronouncing the R sound. That your R is not English. You're not pronouncing it in a erotic accent, so you're not. So starting from, it can be just a joke, it can be just a remark, it can be just a note or a slip of the tongue or something that is said in one's speech about somebody else's performance, but it is going to end up by something very big, harming the mental health of the person who is perceiving this stereotyping. So the person who is stereotyped or stigmatized is going to be seeing themselves as terrible, horrible. They are going to see themselves as a page or as an image of rejection and awkwardness, failure, and they're never going to be successful. Next. And for this reason, they're going to neglect any other competence that they possess. It's like the interview where we have seen the animals, each of them having their competence, but the problem that once they came to the interview, they found themselves just stereotyped because of the accent or because of the performance of one activity rather than the other. So for someone who is linguistically stigmatized or discriminated against, he or she is going to neglect or put aside any positive or any other competence that they possess. That is, we can find that someone who is, let's say, they are professionally successful, personally successful, they are good within their family members, they are good at establishing relations, they are fine everywhere. But once it comes to their, let's say, way of speaking, they fail in a way, or they have this suprasegmental features in their way of producing or producing a language or a foreign language, or they have, between brackets, this accented speech. And just because they have the mother tongue traits on the foreign language or the language they are producing, is going to put aside or erase or diminish any other positive competence they have. So can you imagine that? A person who is socially successful, professionally successful, in their family successful, they are good in everything, everything is going to be diminished, that is avoided, that there is a wall between them and their achievements, and this wall and this real, let's say, limit or barrier is their accent production or their speech production or the way in which they sound. It's something like very, let's say, so harsh and so hard, like someone, and it happens, it can happen to a lot of people, stating that they're good, you find them, they are good, and if you talk to them, but you go to a dark corner inside their mental health, you're going to find that they are sick And here, sickness is not a disease. And this is why linguicism or accentism or glottophobia, it cannot be considered as a disease. It cannot be considered as a disorder, but rather it's something that is related to how a person is treated in the community, and therefore how they are going to base or project or mirror this treatment on themselves. Next. Mental filtering. I didn't talk about that. Would you please return back? Yes. So they have this mental filtering. They're going to focus on the negative side, and any other positive thing is going to be disqualified. Like, you have all the qualities in the world. You are good, successful, literate. You have been into higher schools. You have had diplomas. You have had degrees. You have had experiences in different countries. But you're not going to focus on those achievements, but rather you're going to disqualify them. So you see that from the beginning of our seminar, where we are using lots of negative items that this discrimination holds in its definition or in its layers. Next one is on the emotional reasoning and inferiority complex. Now in here, I can share with you also the results of an article of mine that talks about how people classify regional dialects, or how people they have certain attitudes towards one dialect rather than the other. In the results of my article, or while collecting data, I have distributed a ladder. A ladder is, I think that is with, yeah, okay, nice. A ladder, and this ladder is supposed to be an evaluation scale. That is, here are the dialects that are present here, and you try to evaluate them, that is the respondents, trying to evaluate them as, let's say, socially acceptable, socially neutral, unacceptable, very highly, let's say this is prestigious, highly accepted, and so on and so forth. The results show that there was, that the discrimination that was in there, a clear cut between this is good and this is bad. And because in the recordings, I made them listen to some recordings referring to the urban dialect, to the Bedouin dialect, and there was a dialect that is in between, a neutral variety. So the neutral variety was like in the middle. It's neither urban nor rural, but it's in the middle, that is, it can be accepted. So attitudes are so, let's say, powerful in a way that can be even socially constructed and socially common or socially agreed upon, to the way or to the end that they can end with an inferiority complex. Now, inferiority complex refers to the fact that someone feels inferior to another one, or to a certain community or society, that I do not belong into here and I feel less, I feel unaccepted, I feel inadequate within this environment. I do not belong to here. I want to belong to here, but I cannot because I do not speak this way rather than that way. So this sense or this feeling of being inadequate, that is, you do not fit into here, is known as an inferiority complex. And this can lead to emotional reasoning. That is, you are going to be reasoning based on emotions, thinking based on those negative emotions, and not on what is in reality, or what you can do, or what you can possess, or what you can be competent at. That is, you are going to be reasoning based on everything that is emotional and not based on logic. If someone has been bullied or stereotyped or discriminated against, they're going to be using this emotional reasoning. Why? Because they have been or they are experiencing this inferiority complex. And inferiority complex can also be analogous, or it goes hand in hand with superiority complex, that some people think that they are more superior than others if they're speaking that way, not the other one, or if they possess this rather than the other one, or they belong to this social group rather than the other one. But in here, this superiority complex is not so much harmful in a way that it just belongs to the person, that they feel they are higher than the other. But the inferiority complex is going to be so difficult because the person is going to be under other social and mental and psychological pressures with themselves, that's not only with the society, but also with themselves. Next one. Nice. And then we have got overgeneralization. Now, overgeneralization is like when you're stating that if something has happened to me, or if something bad happens to me in this context, it is going to happen to me in any other context where I am supposed to use the language. And it is the same thing that happened to the majority and a lot of students or learners once they are, let's say, learning a language and they commit a kind of mistake. And once they commit a mistake and it is not corrected or treated in the right way, and this is the blame of the instructor or of the teacher. That is, they have to do their job in a correct way. And also, it is for the learner to state their needs in a, let's say, suitable manner according to the educational setting or institution. Now, overgeneralization refers to the fact that any negative point is going to be projected, or you are thinking like, if something bad happens to me now, if I talked, I committed a mistake or an error, I have been negatively corrected, and my friends or my mates have laughed at me, or they have stigmatized me or discriminated me. So every other single situation is going to be a parallel one. So this student or this learner is not going to be speaking, and they are not going to be performing in any other situation or any other context. Why? Because they are already having this filtering, having this overgeneralization and this catastrophizing. Everything is happening in the brain mind of the learner. They are thinking negatively about themselves, and they are, let's say, staying in their negative bubble, in the dark bubble, and not getting out to face the linguistic reality and diversity. Next. Now, after seeing all those problems and mental issues that can be a consequence of this discrimination, starting from just one negative attitude or a remark or a note or a joke or a slip of tongue or a hidden message within the conversation, or a laughter or whatever thing that we think is simple, but it is going to end up by something that is really harmful. This is why we have to really pay attention to the way in which we treat others. And certainly we have to embrace variation, whatever it is, be it linguistic variation, dialect variation, accent variation, whatever it is. We are varied, we are different, we are born different. That is, we are distinct, and this is why we are born in different places, in different regions, in different backgrounds. And because of this difference, it is this difference that makes the beauty of the world. And we have to bear in mind that languages are just part of this difference and or part of this distinction, and we do not really have to point at what is unfamiliar to us or distinct from us. It is, if we start prejudicing stereotyping, stigmatizing, hating, discriminating, and disrespecting the others, misjudging the others, it is going to be something that is really negative. It is going to be something that is so harmful to one person, especially to their mental health. So I come up to the end of this presentation stating that we have to embrace our differences, whatever they are, in whatever level they exist. We have to embrace them. We have to accept that we are different. And of course, if there is anyone who needs, for example, to better their accent or their production or their pronunciation or their language or their performance, we can help each other in order to get better, because no one was born literate. That is, no one was born educated, but we are educated through time, and we have developed through time. We've not been, probably, if we look at ourselves years ago, we were not what we are at now. So it's the same thing for others. If today they are committing some kind of suprasegmental features in their way of speaking, or the way in which they sound, or their speech is or contains a kind of musicality or tone or pitch, this is completely fine, and it is completely natural. So we have to accept this naturality. We have to accept our difference and accept the way in which everyone has been built and developed, and we have to embrace the way in which we have been created and the way in which we are distinct. So distinction is something that is beautiful, and it is not, or it is not supposed to be leading to this mental health problems or issues or psychological really sickness or problems that can be created or posed on others, but rather we have to help each other in order to get better by embracing our differences. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions or debates or something, you're welcomed. Thank you. I just want to return back to the very first slide that states that in my title, I called it Glottophobia in Education, and I have added a very small or short subtitle saying that if you only know that intelligibility matters more than the accent does. So intelligibility in itself refers to the fact that we are communicating. So if you succeed in communicating, I see that some students, while talking in English, they think that they say that I do not know how to say it. This is not the right pronunciation. Just say it. You're communicating, and this is part of communication, and it is completely fine to commit some kind of mistakes or errors or pitfalls or highs, ups and downs, and it is completely fine to use the language as such. So be confident as far as you communicate well. Focus on the positive side that you have about the language, that you are competent in the language, you can communicate well, you understand the vocabulary, you understand what the other speaker is saying to you, you understand while reading this language. So this is something good. So focus on the positive, and of course for the pronunciation matters, we're going certainly to train our vocal organs on that, so that to make our English better or the production of the foreign language better. So as far as we are communicative, as far as we transmit the message in a good way, in a correct way, we are fine with the language, and then accent or musicality comes later. So that's what I wanted to say. If there is any other thing, you're welcomed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for this very wide-reaching, thought-provoking talk. So, questions, comments? So we already have one. Maybe, yes.
Thank you. I have a critical friend question to pose to you. So this is the first time I've seen this topic addressed from kind of a cognitivist psychological perspective, aside from some random engagement with these types of discourses on social media. I come from a background that says we have to start from society to understand how these things work, not from the mind of the individual. So I wonder, with all of the work being done on that's been done for decades at this point on critical race theory, ratiolinguistics, all of these different types of forms of research that are grounded in anthropology and sociology. How do you connect what you're investigating here with those discourses, if at all? Just to...
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So the thing is that once we are dealing with sociolinguistics, there are some doors that sometimes we cannot see, but other times we cannot escape. So once dealing with language is part of society, that you find yourself in sociology. It's part of the psyche. So you find yourself in psychology. It's part of biology. So you're finding yourself in this way. So you find yourself doing a lot. So in my research at the very beginning, I was interested in people's division according to rural, urban. It was something like very basic in sociolinguistics. But later on, you find like it's not only about that. And society is a combination of a lot of individuals. And those individuals are mental processing. That is the way in which I process this idea is not the same way as you, all of us, process it. So you see that there are some kind or psychological things or biological, or we can even go neurological to understand the processing of one single item or linguistic operation, how it is from one side to another. So in this psychological side, I was just trying to approach it in a very careful way because I'm not, let's say, specialized in that, but I try to, let's say, make some readings on how discrimination is, how social classes are divided according to the subjective view, how people are or can have certain attitudes rather than the other one. So in this case, you move indirectly from your sphere, let's say the safe zone of sociolinguistics, to other parameters, and you find yourself relating one topic to another and reaching further results that are not necessarily seen from a sociolinguistic perspective or how society sees that, but also how the brain of this person committing this kind of, let's say, or producing language this way or that way is functioning. That is what are the consequences on that exact individual that we call, let's say, part of the speech community. So speech community, or in sociolinguistics, we are certainly interested in society and how language is done or processed in society, but also we need to check the brain-mind and the brain functioning or the mindset and the mental processing of certain linguistic operation rather than the others. So in my articles, I tried to approach the concept of attitudes vaguely, not other ones. And once we refer to attitudes, we've got divisions, and those divisions are certainly related to other, let's say, subdivisions and so on and so forth. That is, you want just to try or to approach one item, and then you are going to find yourself with a huge amount of data so that to be classified in this way rather than another. Did I answer you, I hope? Okay. Nice coffee with